Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Andy Curtis. I am the Senior Manager of Customer Service and Graphic Design here at Transfer Express. I've been joining you for these monthly webinars for a very long time. If you've joined me before, I'm glad to have you back. Thank you for coming. If this is your first time with me, then welcome. We are going to talk for somewhere around 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how many questions you guys have. And the topic today is the right heat press platen. We are going to talk about all things platen, having to do with your heat press. So this should be a really interesting video. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about the right heat press platen. So the world of platens. It's funny for me because I've been in this industry for 18 years as of this coming February. It's scary for me, 18 years. And I've been joining you guys for these webinars for, I think, 15 of those years. But the point is that when I started here many years ago, interchangeable platens were definitely a very big plus. They were a very unique feature because not everybody had interchangeable platens. And it was one of those things that not everybody could necessarily afford either. So when I started in this industry, I didn't actually have interchangeable platens. Thank you, Freddie. That's very nice of you. I didn't have interchangeable platens. I had to make things work without being able to switch platens out. So I have that old school experience of having to have collections of mouse pads and books and pieces of 2x4 and other hard materials that I had to use to raise surface areas. So I went to the old school school of heat pressing. So the funny thing for me is now that we do have interchangeable platens and now that you can buy platens for a particular purpose to help you with your project, it is so much easier. It is so much easier. Not that the old school way of working doesn't work, as it certainly does, but it's nice to have interchangeable platens. But we will talk about that in more detail. So let's talk about agenda. So in the next half hour, 45 minutes, we're going to talk about what is a platen, because I'm sure some of you are wondering, like, okay, what are you talking about? What exactly is a platen? And it's not Platen, it's platen. And I get it. I understand. We're from Ohio. We make weird words sometimes, but platen is the word. And then we're going to talk about platen sizes for each heat press. We're going to talk about what size the platens are by default. We're going to talk about interchangeable platens. I'm going to go through all the platens, what you can use them for, what their sizes are. I'm going to show you how to switch out a platen on the newer Hotronics machines. We're going to talk about do's and don'ts, and then we're going to talk about keeping your platen clean. So a whole bunch of interesting platen stuff. And Freddie makes a good point. Yes, we've all gone through it with the cheap. I think it's far more common for the cheaper import presses to not have interchangeable platens. And as we go today, you'll see why that can be detrimental. But all right, so first, before we get into any of that, what is a platen? So a platen is the plate on your heat press, okay? So there is an upper platen and there is a lower platen. Okay, or a top platen and a bottom platen. I prefer the terms upper and lower, but either way. So looking at the photograph here, if you look at the photograph on the right-hand side there, the Air Fusion, you'll see there is a top platen and a lower platen. The lower platen is the blue foam. The top platen is where the heat is actually coming from. So the top platen is what heats up. Now, of course, the exception here is the 360 IQ cap. And then obviously we sell the power platen too, which we're going to review in a couple minutes here. But for the most part, most machines, it's just the upper platen that heats up. So that's what the upper platen is. The upper platen is not interchangeable on the Hotronics presses. The upper platen is where all the heat comes from. The lower platen, the bottom platen, is what you actually set your shirt or your garment on, and that platen is interchangeable. So when we're talking about interchangeable platens, we're talking about that lower platen. So now if you look at the cap press, that's in the bottom left of the picture here, the cap press, that curved blue foam there, that's the lower platen. The upper platen is the hot part that's above it where the heat comes from. Now, with that being said, there is a good example of a press that doesn't follow these rules. That press is the Cricut Easy Press. So I know that probably a lot of us out there have Cricut Easy Presses, and they are a valid, useful tool. They definitely have their place, but a Cricut press does not have a lower platen. It is literally just an upper platen, and just an upper platen by itself is pretty much just an iron for all intents and purposes. Anything that any quote unquote press that doesn't have a lower platen is literally just a big iron. So the problem there being pressure. So what you discover, one of the things that the Hotronics presses, or any press with an upper and a lower platen, what they do is they generate pressure. And when you start to get into how transfers actually work and why transfers do what they do, the three magic elements of making a transfer work are time, temperature, and pressure. And you need an upper platen and a lower platen to generate the proper amount of pressure. That pressure is what causes a transfer to want to stick to a garment. And that's what you're missing with the Cricut Easy Press, is that you don't have that pressure, or the pressure you have to create with your upper body by pressing on the upper platen, since there is no lower platen to generate all that pressure. So you'll notice that shirt presses are flat. Cap presses are curved, obviously, to go with the contour of the cap. And generally, a lower platen, as we're going to continue to discuss today, that's the theme of the day here, is lower platens. The lower platens are made of metal with a rubber pad. So it's a piece of metal with a rubber pad on top. That rubber pad is special, definitely not something to be taken for granted. The rubber pad is the proper amount of squishiness, that it is soft and has some give. But it's also firm enough that the heat press still generates all the necessary pressure that the transfer needs. Because there are some elements, there are some accessories to heat presses that are soft and squishy and sort of cancel out pressure, and that's not something we want with Transfer Express products. So, but that's what a platen is. The upper platen is where the heat comes from. The lower platen is what you set the shirt on. So the next topic here is the default sizes for the heat presses. The default sizes, these are all of the sizes that the heat presses are when you purchase them. Now you'll notice that some heat presses do have multiple sizes. You'll notice that the Auto Open Clam and the Max both have a couple different sizes. This is the default sizes. These are the default sizes that the upper platen comes in. Now, obviously, the theme of the talk today is we're going to talk about interchangeable lower platens, but it's important to know the size of your upper platen, because then you know what your limitations are. For example, if you purchase a Max 11 by 15 machine, then obviously it wouldn't make sense for you to purchase a 16 by 20 lower platen. Because your upper platen, where the heat is only 11 by 15. So it's important to know the size of your upper platen so you can understand its limitations in terms of what kind of lower platens you can get for it, and also what type of garments you can press. I mean, if you're doing a full front, if somebody wants to fill the whole front of a shirt, 11 by 11 design, then the 11 by 11, then obviously that craft press, that 9 by 12, it's going to be a problem because it's only 9 by 12 as opposed to 11 by 11. So it's important to know the size of your heat press, and it's important to actually do some digging on this. When you go to purchase a heat press, you really need to know what your goal is. If you're going to be pressing a lot of full fronts, then you want a heat press that's large enough to accommodate that. If you're going to be doing a lot of small things, if you're going to be doing a lot of left chests and a lot of random sleeve stuff, that kind of thing, then maybe it does make sense to have a smaller press. So the important thing is these are the default sizes that these different presses come in. So you see the clam machines are really the more versatile in terms of having some options there. 11 by 15 being a great small starter size. 16 by 20 is nice when you're doing a big full front. You're going to be doing a lot of big stuff. Then, of course, you've got the middle ground, 15 by 15 or 16 by 16. The A to Z swing away is really nice. The 15 by 15 is not a bad size. I personally am one of those people where I like to have a lot of space, and honestly, that 15 by 15, at first you go, "Ooh, this is smaller than the 16 by 20." But you know what? I don't end up missing that space really that much, so that's not a bad deal at all. The 15 by 15 swing away, the A to Z is really nice for that. The craft press is a little bit small with the 9 by 12 footprint, but again, this is nice because it's easy to transport. It's easy to move around. It's a great price point, that 9 by 12 craft press. But again, that catch is that 9 by 12 is a little bit on the small side. So again, you need to ask yourself what exactly you're using this heat press for, what kind of projects are you going to be doing, and then make sure to get a heat press that jives with that. And if you ever need to talk these things out, if you need to discuss this with somebody and you're sitting there going, okay, well, I know what kind of projects I want to do, Andy, but I'm still not sure what press is the best for me, absolutely give us a call and talk that kind of stuff out, because we can walk you through be your sounding board, or at least help you with that decision. So don't ever hesitate to ask. So the cap presses too, these are the default sizes for the cap presses. Now, the funny thing about this is that the interchangeable platens, definitely useful for the cap press. They're useful for both presses, but I find myself, when I'm pressing caps, I find myself really loving the interchangeable platens for the original cap machines. Now, that being said, the 360 IQ hat press, that is a really neat press, because that lower platen isn't interchangeable. It's just one platen for everything. That's really slick. That's a really neat feature that machine has. So the IQ 360 hat press is really neat. But if you've got one of the Hotronics Auto Open or the Max cap presses, then that's definitely you definitely want to have the other size cap platens for those. These days, there's a million different kinds of hats out there, the baseball hats and the low crown hats and the trucker hats. It's nice to have the different size cap platens so you can adjust and you can have the right size platen to be able to properly print the right size hat. Okay, so if you hadn't gotten the idea so far, so why interchangeable platens? What's the point? The key here is to, for any application, the key is to have a hard, even surface and to avoid seams, pockets, buttons, and zippers. So in my photograph here, you see we're pressing a bag, and you see we've already made a mistake here. We've made a mistake because the handle of the bag is on the lower platen. You do not want that there, because that creates a big obstacle. You can see in the picture the handle is actually down inside the bag. So that first of all, you're not going to have a flat surface. Second of all, even if you did press it flat, that handle is going to be in the way. It's not going to allow you to get a nice, flush, clean hit on the front of that bag because the handle is down inside there. You need to pull that handle out, and where the handle is sewn onto the bag itself, you need for those seams, those thick seams that you see where the handle is sewn onto the bag, you need those seams to be out of the way too. This is one of those things people forget sometimes, especially when we're talking about bags, tote bags. You don't want the seams where the tote bag handles are sewn onto the bag, whether that seam is inside the bag or outside, like in our fancy bag that we have in this picture here. You don't want that seam there. And the truth of it is, depending on which heat press you have, you might not be able to orient the bag so that the handle hangs off naturally. Sometimes you can. It depends on the size of your press, and it depends on the type of press you have. But in this case, you can't orient the bag in such a fashion that allows those handles to hang off the edge unless you put both layers of the bag on top of the press, and that's not good either. So this is where the lower platen, the interchangeable lower platen, is a lifesaver, because you get an interchangeable lower platen that's a smaller size. For example, with a tote bag, like in my picture here, I'd probably use the 11 by 15 platen. 16 by 20. I would take off that 16 by 20 lower platen, put on my 11 by 15 lower platen, and 95% of these problems revolve around obstacles and people not having a flat surface. people will sometimes place. You've got the muff pocket, you've got the thick collars, you've got the drawstrings that are in. So we're going to talk about each of these different lower platens as we go here. And we're going to talk about what each of them is used for. But this is a really neat little chart that I wanted to share with everybody. This is super useful because this actually shows you which machines, which platens can be used for. So you'll notice that some platens can be used on some machines. Now, the reason for this is there are some machines that the angle at which they open doesn't jive with this particular type of project. And there are some machines that are just not made for these types of platens. But at the end of the day, this is a really useful document to have because this shows you the regular platens, it shows you the specialty platens, and it shows you which platens can be used on which machines. So again, everybody is going to get an 4 platen. So it's 4 inches by 4 inches, and I know the first question is, well, what in the world are you going to do with a tiny little platen like that? Let me tell you. There's a lot of things you can do with this platen. This is super useful. This is one of my favorite platens. You can do shirt tags. You can do left chests. And I know on my slide I put youth left chests, but honestly, if your adult size left chest, if you do a pocket size, which is 3.5 by 3.5, that works here too. Bags, back yokes, short sleeves, and flags on the sleeves, or sometimes you even see that with sponsors. They'll put sponsors on sort of the bicep area of the short sleeve. And that's, you know what, Freddie, that is a fantastic question. Freddie's asking, is there a reason why I can't use the leg sleeve platen on my autoclam? You know what, we're going to talk about that when we get to that lower platen, Freddie, so hang tight on that question. We'll talk about that. But the 4x4, super versatile. It works on all the presses except for the A to Z press and the craft press. And the one hitch here is that there is no quick slip cover available for the 4x4. The quick slip cover is a useful cover. It's sort of a non-stick coating on this particular cover, so it's easy to slide garments on and off. But you know what? With this 4x4, with the things you'll be doing with the 4x4, you don't actually need the quick slip cover. So even though one's not available, it's really not a big deal. Trust me when I tell you, don't get me wrong, it would be nice, but it's not a big deal. All right, the next one is the 6x10 bottom platen. So the 6x10 platen is nice because it's kind of that intermediate size. It's not quite big enough for adults, but it's big enough for kids stuff. This is a nice platen for any weird things you might have. For example, infant garments where you're talking bigger than toddler. They're at that right size where you're not doing tiny little stuff, but it's not quite adult sizes yet. Onesies, you can also do onesies really easily on the 6x10. And again, something to keep in mind, when we say 6x10, you can rotate that either way. So we're talking 6 wide, 10 tall, or 10 wide and 6 tall. So you can definitely flip flop that and do either way. So infant stuff, onesies. Tote bags, this would be another option. Again, earlier I mentioned tote bags, and this is all dependent upon the size of your tote bag and what you're doing with it. If you've got a big bag and you're like filling up the whole front of the bag, then you might want the bigger one that I'm going to show you on the next slide. If you're talking about a regular size tote bag and you're doing a smaller design on it, then the 6x10 here works just fine too. And then left chests, if you're doing a left chest and you've got something that's maybe got obstacles of some kind like buttons, the 6x10 is nice for that too. And youth hoodies. Again, hoodies have all kinds of obstacles all over the place. So if you're pressing youth hoodies with all of those obstacles, this 6x10 is a godsend in that case. So the 8x10 platen, the 8x10 platen is super useful too. This is a nice intermediate size. It's a little bit bigger than the 6x10. It's available for everything but the A to Z and the craft press, used for cinch sacks, bags, and youth apparel. So same thing with adult apparel, youth apparel. It's the same thing where you've got buttons and zippers and seams and stuff in the way. My favorite example, and I know maybe 2020 is not the right year to discuss sports since nobody's playing sports, but my favorite example of this is volleyball jerseys. I love volleyball jerseys because it's so interesting how creative volleyball seems to get. I mean, every sports jerseys are unique and creative, but volleyball is just they're definitely out there. There's some really cool volleyball stuff these days. But the hitch is there are seams and piping and all sorts of stuff all over the place on volleyball jerseys. This is where the 8x10 is super useful because volleyball jerseys, usually being sleeveless or being tight anyway, you don't have a lot of space to work with, and you got to get around the piping and those things and stuff. So this is where the 8x10 is super useful on the youth stuff. So again, if you're talking adult apparel, then okay, 8x10 might be a little small, but if you're doing a lot of youth stuff, the 8x10 is super useful. The 11x15. The 11x15, this is for everything except the A to Z press and the craft press. The 11x15 platen is really nice because it is super duper versatile. There's a lot of different things you can do with the 11x15. It is that perfect size for women's apparel. The 11x15, if you rotate it, so we're talking 11 width-wise and 15 height-wise, if you rotate it that way, it's perfect to do ladies' shirts, baby doll tees, that kind of fitted stuff. Super nice for that. And again, I use this for tote bags personally. I use the 11x15 when I'm pressing on tote bags. And then again, youth uniforms as well, depending on which type of youth uniforms we're talking about. Again, the age will always decide which type of platen you're going with, whether it's the 8x10 or the 6x10 or the 11x15. If we're talking about really young kids, then that's when you go to that smaller 6x10 platen. If you're talking about bigger kids, almost adults, then that's where the 11x15 press is nice too. And again, when we're talking about all these lower platens, I just want to remind everybody that the whole point here is to ask yourself what kind of things you're going to be heat pressing, what kind of projects you're going to be doing, and then making sure you have the right equipment for it. If you're not going to do little kid jerseys ever, and that's never going to be a thing, then okay, maybe that 6x10 platen is something that's not useful for you. But if you are going to do tote bags and you do want to do fitted ladies tees, then maybe that 11x15 press platen is useful for you. So now we're going to talk about the specialty platens. So the specialty platens, thus far, all the platens we've talked about have all been pretty simple, squares, rectangles, nothing crazy. So we're going to get into the weirder platens that are different shapes and have specific uses. So the 7-inch round platen, this guy is nice because there's all kinds of weird things out there that you want to press that are just shaped oddly. And the rectangles that we've talked about so far are either too big in one direction or the 4x4 square is just too small. So the 7-inch round is a really great solution for weird stuff. My favorite here is our Bedford bear. This is one of my favorite little projects that we've done using the 7-inch round platen. That is so cool. This was a stuffed animal that we were able to remove the stuffing from, but then we had to press on his belly there, and we couldn't use one of the rectangular presses because they were just too big. We couldn't fit him on there. The 7-inch round was perfect. We were able to fit him around the 7-inch round platen, put it up in him, and heat press on his belly without a problem. And then in the left-hand side there, that's the top of a hat. There's a million names for these things. I believe the proper name is they're called bucket hats. I think of it as a fishing hat. Maybe I'm crazy. But the bucket hats, this was literally the perfect size platen to press on the top of a bucket hat. You could also, on the ends of round bags, the roll bags, we've all seen those types of bags. Again, different sports and they're different shaped bags. But the round roll bags, if you want to press on the round end of one of those, the 7x7 platen is literally the perfect size for that too. All right, the shoe platen. So the shoe platen is 6 by 15, and the shoe platen is made to press on the side of high top shoes. So in my picture here, you see that we've pressed this Tigers transfer on the side of a black high top. Now, the shoes don't necessarily have to be high tops. They're just easier to press on. You can press on the sides of other shoes too. Again, you need to make sure you have a flat surface though. So make sure when you're pressing on shoes, make sure that you're getting a shoe that has a flat surface large enough to actually press on. And what's nice too, you can use the shoe platen as well to press on the back of a shoe if you hang the shoe on the end of the shoe platen instead of fitting it around. If you look at the size of the shoe platen there, you can see that the two wings, the two opposite wings of the platen are shaped like shoes. So that's the idea of how you slip that shoe on that platen. But if you were to hang the shoe on the end, you can actually press on the heel of a shoe that way too. So very versatile, very fun to be able to heat press on shoes. Though this is admittedly one of those things, this is definitely a specialty product because it is not something that you see all the time. There's not an army of people out there looking for shoe customization necessarily. But if you have a crowd, if you have an idea and you have people who have asked about this or are willing to do this, then you have to get a shoe platen. And again, they're available for all heat presses except the A to Z and the craft press. All right, so again, another really neat specialty platen. This is the hat bill platen. So if you look at my photograph here, this is the platen that you use to press on the underside of a hat bill. Okay, so not the top of the hat bill. You can use a regular hat press for that. But on the bottom of the hat bill. So if you're going to press on the bottom of it, this is the platen that you need to do so. And again, if you can't tell in my picture, what we've done here is we've flipped those hats upside down. The bills are laying on the platen, allowing us to press those transfers on there. So now the hitch with the hat bill platen is that you cannot use clamshell presses with that. You do need to use one of our presses that is comes down from above. The clamshell presses, the angle at which they close makes it so that you can't load up the hat platen properly. It's also sort of awkward the way it closes on the hat bill, so you don't want to do that. This is where you're going to want a fusion or an air fusion, that sort of press to do these types of projects. But again, super useful if you're going to decorate the underside of a hat bill. This is the only way to do it. And the can cooler platen. So the can cooler platen is different because you'll notice there is no foam pad on the can cooler platen. And the reason for that is that it is not necessary. The can cooler platen, as you can see from the picture, is designed to press 8 can coolers all at the same time. And can coolers tend to be padded themselves, so that's why there is no foam pad on the can cooler platen. It's not necessary. But this is super nice. If you're going to ever do a whole bunch of can coolers, and these are super popular in weddings. Every wedding I have been to in the last year or two, virtually every wedding, I should say, have all had can coolers as one of the little takeaways for either the wedding party or the guests or whatever. Can coolers are so much fun. And you can get really nice can coolers very cheaply these days. The one hitch when you do buy can coolers to decorate, make sure they're the kind of can cooler that sit flat, like the ones in my picture here. You see, these are the type that the bottom drops out and folds, so they do sit flat so they can be decorated. If we go back to the 80s, you used to see a lot of can coolers that were made of foam, and they were sort of glued in a fashion where it couldn't be flattened out. You can't decorate those this way, so you want to make sure you have a collapsible can cooler. And again, this is definitely the easiest way to press can coolers. The next one is the leg sleeve platen. So this is just a single leg or sleeve. So this is pressing one leg or sleeve at a time. Now, this is you got to have this. If you're going to press on the leg of sweatpants or the sleeve of a sweatshirt, there are ways to do it without this platen. But it is such a gigantic pain This makes pressing on legs and sleeves a whole world easier of a project. Trust me when I tell you. And again, the point is, when you try to press on the leg of a pair of sweatpants, inside those legs, you've got seams that get in the way. And those seams can definitely impede the adhesion of your transfer. They can actively screw it up, actually. You can get seams that press through the ink and disrupt the ink, that kind of stuff. So that's why you use the platen when you're doing legs or sleeves, because you need to avoid that seam that's in the sleeve or the leg. So point being here, this allows you to press one leg or sleeve at a time. Now, this needs to be used on the Fusion, the Air Fusion, or the Dual Air Fusion only. And the reason for this, again, is that angle of that clamshell comes down weird and does not lend itself towards a nice, clean application. The clamshells just, it's one of those where people go, well, I could do that. It's the right size. It'll fit on my clamshell. It's not about fit necessarily here. The problem is about the physics behind it. The fact that the clamshell makes contact at the back and then works its way forward. It's just awkward for this size, and it's awkward for this application. You need the heat presses that come down from above, which is the Fusion, Air Fusion, and Dual Air Fusion. And Freddie, you were asking earlier, it's the same logic here with our double leg sleeve platen as well. I'm sorry, you were asking about why you couldn't use the leg platen on your regular press, and that was why you can't use that with the clam presses because of the angle at which the clam comes down. But now this is different with the double leg sleeve press, because you see the way this is shaped is the way it comes down is not so disruptive because the leg or sleeve is closer towards the front of the press. But again, what's making this different is the fact that this press is made so you can do two legs or two sleeves at a time. Now, the hitch with this platen is that it can only go on a 16 by 20 press. So if you have a 16 by 16 or a 15 by 15 press, you cannot use this platen. This platen can only go on a 16 by 20 press. But again, the benefit here is you can press two legs or two sleeves at the same time. Again, super duper useful. If you're going to do a lot of legs and sleeves and you've got a 16 by 20 press, this is another one of those must-haves. All right, so I promised we would take a look at how to change a lower platen. If you have one of the more recent Hottronics model presses, you know how easy this is. And if you don't, this is the photograph. This is where you can see how easy this is. So the newer Hottronics models, literally, it's just a lever system. You grab the lever and you pull it to unlock it, lift the lower platen straight up and off, and then you place the new lower platen down. It's a pin assembly, and you see there will be a hole where you will put the pin of the next platen directly into, and then you close the lever. Now, the one thing I want to throw out to everybody, when you look at the picture in the middle here, when you lift the lower platen off and you lift it up, you need to be careful, because remember, that upper platen is where all the heat is coming from. And trust me, as somebody who has done this on more than one occasion, you will burn the heck out of your hands if you are not careful about this. This is why a lot of people will tend to change their lower platen before they turn the press on. Or at the very least, you can do it while the press is running. You just got to be careful about it. Don't jerk, don't pull real hard, don't go fast. You want to go slow. You want to make sure you don't burn the heck out of yourself here. All right, and we talked about the cap platens earlier. Obviously, I didn't show you pictures of each individual one because for all intents and purposes, they all look exactly the same. But you'll notice the sizes are different, and that's kind of the point here. This was a different situation 15 years ago. 15, 16 years ago, there was one kind of hat, really. There was one size baseball hat, and that was it. These days, there are lots of different sizes and styles of hats. I am constantly surprised by the hat industry and what they come up with. But the hitch is that you've got the low-profile stuff, you've got the high-crown stuff, you've got the trucker-style foam caps. The point is, if you have the wrong-sized cap platen, and you're trying to, let's say you've got a high profile hat, a tall hat, but you've got a small platen, and you're trying to press a transfer on the whole front of your tall hat, you're not going to be able to do that if you've got a smaller platen, because it's not going to actually make contact. Your transfer would be partially hanging off the platen, which means it wouldn't actually apply. So with hats, it's definitely necessary. The funny thing is with shirts, any of the other platens we saw today, there are unique and clever ways you could press those things without having to have those platens. Pain in the butt, hard to do, but possible. With hats, it's really not possible. You can actively ruin hats by not having the right size platen. So if you do have a hat press and you are going to press hats, you definitely very much do need to have the right size platen with that. And because I threw it out there, I wanted to put this to you too. If you are in a pinch, if you are pressing something unique and you don't have, Andy, I don't have time to order a platen. I need to get these done tonight or tomorrow. I need to do these now. Remember, the whole point to all of this talk about platens is to avoid the obstacles, the buttons, the seams, the zippers, all that stuff that gets in the way. When you have those obstacles, the whole goal is to get around them. This is where mouse pads are super useful. Now, we actually sell mouse pads here at Transfer Express, and sure, you could decorate them, but honestly, the reason we sell the mouse pads is for this exact use. So you can use them to raise the surface area of your garment above seams and buttons and zippers. And the nice thing about buying mouse pads for this purpose is they are so super cheap that you can chop these mouse pads up and cut them up to be the right size. So if you were going to tell me, Andy, I got to do these short sleeves for this baseball team, but I don't have time to order a 4x4 platen like you were talking about, I would tell you to buy a mouse pad, cut that mouse pad to be the perfect size to fit inside the sleeve, and do it that way. It's still going to be a pain in the butt to get it to sit nice on the press, and you're going to need a third hand, but you can do it is the point. And the power platens, this is super nice. If you do a lot of decorating on the heat-sensitive garments, these can be very useful. Now, for us here at Transfer Express, there are only two products you can use the power platens on, and that's AquaTrue and Ultracolor. But the whole point here is the power platen is a lower platen that functions just like all the other lower platens we've talked about, but this lower platen heats up like the upper platen. And again, the use for this is the garments that are heat sensitive, heating from below can help to prevent scorching. So there are 4 sizes available: 16 by 20, 11 by 15, 6 by 20, so like sleeves, legs, that kind of stuff, and 6 by 6. So now the controllers are sold separately, and these are compatible with the 16 by 20 auto clam, the max clam, and the air fusion, although you don't want to use that 6 by 20 on the auto clam for the same reason we just talked about why you don't want to use the sleeve and leg platen on the auto clam. That whole the angle at which the clam comes down is not good. And again, super useful for those polyester garments that would scorch under normal circumstances. When you use the bottom platen, you can prevent scorching. One way of preventing scorching, but again, only can be used with the AquaTrue and Ultracolor transfers here at Transfer Express. We talked about the Platen Covers earlier, so now here's a photograph of one so we can definitely get the point across to everybody. The quick slip pad protectors, the Platen Covers, are super useful. Number one, they help keep your lower platen clean. If you've ever seen a lower platen that is caked in years of ink and schmutz, it is not nice. They can actually, once you get enough crud built up on your lower platen, you can actually start to mess up transfers. They start to absorb color and it starts to make an uneven surface. So definitely you want to make sure you keep your lower platen clean. But more importantly, it makes it easier to dress, or the proper term is thread. It makes it easier to thread your apparel, where you open up the shirt and slide it on there. That lower platen cover is nice because it slides real nice. If you've ever tried to slide a shirt onto the rubber, the foam rubber that's on the lower platen, you know that it's very sticky and it doesn't like to slide. The lower platen is only used on the bottom, and there are top covers if you're interested. Top covers are only used for certain projects, and you don't want to use a top cover unless you're doing certain types of projects, because the top covers can actively impede your transfer from being heated properly and will cause your transfer to be under applied. So yes, top covers exist. Yes, there is a point to them, but you don't want to use them by default because they can mess up the application of your transfer. Bottom covers don't, because there is no heat coming from these standard bottom platens, but the heat does come from the top platen. So if you use a top cover, that top cover actively deflects more heat. So definitely something to think about. You don't necessarily need a top cover unless you're doing sublimation projects. Cleaning tips. So as somebody who has made a mess on more than one heat press in his day, let me tell you that cleaning the heat press is not as difficult as you might think it is. First of all, it's important to note that all Hotronix heat presses, and again, I can't speak for other brands, but all Hotronix heat presses have a coating on the upper platen to make them easy to clean. This means you don't have to do anything wacky. If you make a mess and you put a transfer on upside down, you literally just need to grab a clean, dry cloth. You can even use an old t-shirt. You turn the press off so that it starts to cool down. But before the press gets cool all the way, you want it to be warm, not hot, because you don't want to burn yourself. While the press is cooling down and still warm, you take that clean cloth and you just wipe. That's all. Because there's a non-stick coating on the Hotronix presses, you don't have to do anything crazy to it. Now, if you do manage to get some amount of ick on the upper platen and it's not wiping off completely, you'll find that sometimes ghost images do appear if you've pressed something upside down. Most of the time, those ghost images don't hurt anything. It's not a big deal. It's annoying, yes, visually. We hate that it happens to our presses, and we try to keep our presses nice, but occasionally it happens. When this goes down, you can use Gojo or other iron cleaners. Or honestly, in those types of situations, what I tend to do in the past is I take that same clean cloth, but I get it damp. You don't want it dripping, just damp is fine. And then you get some Dawn dish detergent, and again, use that. Treat it like you're wiping off mom's really nice nonstick pan, right? And you use that, and again, you want the press to be warm but not hot, because obviously, you know, the damp cloth on a hot press is going to cause it to sizzle. But wiping like that works nice too. Whoo boy, we covered a lot of stuff, and I went over 45 minutes just a little bit. I'm so sorry. But we covered a lot. We talked about all of those platens. We talked about the different sizes of the heat presses. We talked about the uses of all of those presses, how to clean a press. Lots of information. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am so sorry that we had some sound issues there at the beginning again, too. I don't know why that's happening. I promise we're going to figure out and get to the bottom of that before next month's webinar. So my sincerest personal apologies there, folks. In the meantime, if you have questions, if you have ideas, if you have anything you want to talk to us about, please hit us up, info@transferexpress.com. We check that email address all the time. We are always watching that email address, and we will respond to you in a very fast fashion. We also invite you to give us a call and talk to us about any of the things that you've seen today, questions, etc. I also encourage you to visit our award-winning blog. Our marketing team puts together our blog, constantly updates with new articles, blog.transferexpress.com. Our goal is to help teach you all sorts of fun ideas and show you new things to do and tell you new things that are going on. Our blog is the best place to get a hold of us. Michael, trade shows. Trade shows are a complicated topic right now, Michael. Because of COVID in 2020, most trade shows have been canceled. There are trade show issues happening, or there are trade shows happening, but they are mostly digital trade shows. So you can see those at our website. You can see the ones that are available, and Well, then there you go. Yes, we do have a virtual event happening this first week of January. So, and then there's the DAX show as well. So there's a couple virtual trade shows going on, Michael. But in the meantime, like I said, hit up our blog, check us out, and then this webinar will be posted at www.transferexpress.com/webinars. So definitely check us out. Let us know if you have any questions or suggestions. In the meantime, thank you everybody for joining me today. I appreciate it. I will see you again this time next month. Have a fantastic December and a fantastic holiday season.